You're a multi-six-figure entrepreneur who has had years where you have doubled your revenue. What makes you so successful?
You have to be relentless as a business owner in a way. People talk about small business ownership as this kind of like magic wand. If you're training for a marathon, you wouldn't expect your running coach to teach you how to train for a marathon without getting tired. You just have to work out where to put the tired. The reality is for a lot of small business owners, this is not that straightforward because I think temperamentally you have to be very thick-skinned. You do have to kind of brush yourself off, dust yourself down. As a business owner, you do have to push yourself out of your comfort zone time and time again. It's like with your mindset, you have to work on it all the time. Wouldn't it be great if it was just about how hard we worked?
Wouldn't it just be great if just the hardest working people got success?
And I'd say my purpose is that I believe that the retail industry can be better. It was about being brave enough to say, actually, I think I've got something that could be useful. That is something that I wasn't really prepared for. I just couldn't do it anymore. It was just complete meltdown.
Don't Work Harder is the show for entrepreneurs who are ready to catapult their business forward, because we believe it's not about working longer, harder or smarter, it's about those braver moments. One bold move is worth 1,000 small steps. So rather than those small incremental movements that are moving you forward at a much slower pace, we're going to share with you the stories of successful entrepreneurs who've taken those big, bold steps to move them forward. This show is brought to you by Atomic, and I'm your host, Suman Randhawa, and I'm here not only to share with you the stories of entrepreneurs and the success that they've had, but you'll also walk away with the insights of what they did at that exact moment when they made that change that moved their business forward. Catherine, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. I think I always start with that line, but this is a line that I don't always get to say, which is, you're a multi-six-figure entrepreneur who has had years where you have doubled your revenue. What makes you so successful?
Well, I think there's so many different ways of answering that.
Yeah.
I think that part of the times where I've doubled my revenue, it's been about working out what's really worked in the business and leaning into that. It's about trying new things, new offers. It's about being really clear on what success means. And it's interesting actually, because, one of the things I work a lot with my clients on is what is your definition of success? Because yes, the revenue numbers sound great, but ultimately I believe that you have to build a business that works for you. But I think probably from a, purely strategic level, I'm very focused on who I work with. I only work with e-commerce businesses and brands and independent retailers. So I only work with people who make products. That's the only kind of business that I work with. And I base everything that I do with them on really deep knowledge of the industry. This is my 25th year in the retail industry. I started in the year 2000.
Is this where I say you don't look old enough? That's where
Please,
I say
yeah. And so I am a big believer in really leaning on deep knowledge with working with my clients. And I think that having that really clear niche, having that really clear focus has definitely been what's helped me along the way.
25 years in any industry, that is an incredible amount of like you said, the deep level expertise. Yes. So, when you're ticking, I don't know if anybody else ever wonders this, but when you're ticking your insurance,
right,
and you're saying what your role is.
Yes.
What do you tick? What are you?
I would say founder.
Okay.
I'm probably the most comfortable with that. Founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is the business name. And I think that it's interesting. I don't, or sometimes I just say business consultant, to be honest. If somebody asks me what I do, I usually say I'm a business consultant for product-based businesses. So people who sell products, shops and e-commerce. And that's kind of how I would describe myself. But I'm not really super comfortable with the term entrepreneur. I don't know why. I think it's a bit like thought leader. I'm not sure you can call yourself a thought leader. I'm not sure maybe you can call yourself an entrepreneur. I don't know. I think for me, founders is just factual, really. Okay.
And you've got all of that big experience, like you said. So kind of what if we were to like highlight what it is you do, it's you're consultant, or almost like a business consultant for product-based businesses.
Yeah.
But you just said they're bricks and mortar and online?
Yes.
Okay. So how long has your business existed?
So I started in 2018, so 7 years now.
Okay. Seems like it was such a pivotal year for so many people. What happened in 2018 then?
Well, I actually left my last corporate job in 2017, the very end of 2017.
Okay.
And what had happened was, in a nutshell, so I worked in corporate retail for nearly 2 decades.
Right.
So that was my, I guess still the bulk of my experience in the retail industry. I worked for all the way up to the largest budget that I managed was £400 million.
Wow.
So I was working...
Who was that? Whose budget was that?
A US-based company.
Goodness me.
So I worked in the US for 5 years and I worked in London for a number of years as well. And I had worked my way up. I got quite far quite quickly. So I was managing a team, and I'd managed a team for over a decade at that point. And then I was working for Paperchase, which now sadly no longer exists, but at the time was very much the Paperchase that a lot of people knew and loved.
Yeah.
And I was managing the stationery and art teams. And on paper, sounds like the dream job. So managing stationery for Paperchase. And as much as it was, again, like the dream job on paper, and I had a fabulous team who I loved, and I loved working with the buying team, and it was a very creative place to be. It was also a very difficult business to be in. And I was at that sort of middle management level for a really long time, where you've got a lot of pressure coming down, and you're also managing everybody who's feeling the pressure beneath you.
Right.
And I'd moved around to several different roles, across about a 5 or 6 year period. I'd tried a couple of different roles out. I'd been in one company that had failed, and then I'd moved a couple of times, and it was just this extremely toxic environment. And I kept moving, and I almost knew when I went to Paperchase, like, this is the last role, and if this doesn't work out, I'm going to have to come to the conclusion that it's not just the role, it's almost like the industry, like it's just not working for me.
And what was Catherine, just so I can understand, what was the measurable, what was it that you needed to do in these roles?
So my role was merchandising.
Okay.
And inside a big retailer, there are 3 product teams. There's the buying team, the design team, and the merchandising team.
Okay.
Buying and design, most people have a general sense of what that involves.
Yeah.
Merchandising, different to visual merchandising, it's effectively the budget keepers for the business.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So the way I like to describe it is that merchandising is how you make sure that the creative ideas make money.
Okay.
So you tell the buyers how much they've got to spend, when it can come in, you give them targets for what margins they have to achieve, and you basically managing the stock once it hits the stores as well. So making decisions about putting it on sale if it's not selling, managing your stock targets, your sales targets, coming up with a strategy, but very much from a numbers point of view.
Right.
So whereas it was almost designed to have a 3-way tension in a way that produced good results, that the design team are very driven by inspiration and they wanted to bring in the new things and the new product. The buying team, very commercial, really picking what they believed was directional for the company and what the customer needed, as well as managing the relationship with the suppliers. And then merchandising is all about, okay, well, what do the numbers say? So how do we make sure it all at the end of the day makes money? So a big part of that is trading. On a Monday, you report how everything's gone, how it's all doing. And if your numbers were up, great. And if your numbers were down, you had to explain why they were down. And it almost got to the point where you were almost having to implicate yourselves and your team and say, well, if we tried to do this differently or that differently, then we would have got a better result. And it wasn't really, a lot of the time, I think the thing I struggled with was a lot of the time in these big corporate retailers, it wasn't about, hey guys, how can we fix this? How can we do better? It was about, okay, well, whose fault is it?
How interesting.
The most important thing we need to do is work out whose fault it is, make sure that the blame has been apportioned correctly.
Wow.
And I just found that after, 18 years, just completely exhausting and not the way I like to operate. And the truth is that, well, obviously Paperchase is now in administration. Most of the companies that I worked for over the years, only one of them is actually still trading as a going concern. And I think a lot of what I felt in my role was really all to do with this fact that these big retailers were under a lot of pressure, and they were, essentially the writing was on the wall, and maybe the exec team knew that, and they were almost like rolling that pressure downhill. But there was very, very little inspirational leadership where people would say, right, guys, this is going to be tough, but we can get through it. Let's go. It was always, well, who messed up? So I think what I felt in my role, now I look back, I think was a symptom of really what's been happening in the retail industry for a long time. So that was really, I think a lot of people start their businesses because they feel called to do something. Whereas I started my business because I left my corporate world because I just couldn't do it anymore. I just was done. I felt burnt out. I felt in a bad place, really. I just felt like I just couldn't keep doing it. It felt like Groundhog Day. It felt like, well, if I go somewhere else, this is just going to be, same thing, different day. And so I decided I was going to leave. And I actually didn't, at that time, fully know what I wanted to do. In fact, my team, when I left, they gave me, as a joke, a happy retirement card.
Did you laugh?
I did, yeah, because they were kind of like, most people when they left, they were like, oh, I'm going to this company, I'm going to that company, right. I'm moving for this job, I'm moving for that job. And they were like, well, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm not really sure yet. And they, as a joke, were like, oh, I guess you're retiring then. So
we're going to take a short pause to hear from one of our sponsors. Sponsors help us make the best show possible. Don't Work Harder is sponsored by Constant Contact, the digital marketing platform built with small business owners in mind. With Constant Contact, you can grow your contacts list, send out more emails, organize social media and events, and simply get more done with their advanced automation tools. It's everything you need to grow your business, advance your automation, and attract more of the right customers all in one place. Visit consultant..With to get started. So it's quite interesting because obviously I know you now.
Yes.
I didn't know you then.
Yeah.
And for anyone who doesn't know Catherine, one of the things, like when I think about you, you have got such a relaxed air. Mm-hmm. I remember, there's like 2 years running now, you've run a huge online summit with some big, big names on there. And yet, just 7 years ago, if my sums are right, 7 years ago, just 7 years ago, you had no idea what you were doing. So you are such a leading expert in what you do. You have grown your business and scaled your business. What was it that you did that took you from there to here?
Well, I mean, it's a really interesting question.
It's a big question, I know.
I mean, I think it's interesting because actually my degree is in international business. So I did international business at Warwick Business School, which when you think about it, it's kind of funny when an 18-year-old, or as 18 when I started, does a business degree, because you're sitting there in lectures.
I mean, at Warwick, it's pretty impressive.
But you're sitting there having these lectures about business, and I think I've probably been inside an office like one time.
Okay, yeah. You didn't actually have that life working experience.
Yeah. So I think I'm actually genuinely fascinated by business.
Okay.
Fascinated by my client's business, and I'm fascinated by my own business as well, and the process of building a business. But I think in terms of what got me there, I mean, when I first started out, so I originally left and then I took a bit of a break. I mean, like a couple of months. I think I applied to the Bake Off. I didn't get picked, but...
You're a baker then?
Yeah, I love to bake.
Okay.
And I just took a bit of a break because I was pretty burnt out, and we'd just gone through Christmas, which at Paperchase was huge. And I actually worked nearly 5 months notice. I didn't have to, but I didn't want to desert my team at the peak time. So we went all the way through to Christmas. Then I left. And then I was trying to work out what I wanted to do. And at the beginning, I was assigned a business advisor through the council. They had some kind of free scheme where you could go and talk to somebody, which was, great when you're starting out. And I remember I went to see this guy, and he said to me, so what's your business idea? And I'd spent some time thinking about it. And I decided that I wanted to see if my knowledge of how you make money in a retail business would be useful to small businesses. because I'd always loved independent retail. I've been in the retail industry forever. I've done millions of shop visits and competitor research and everything else. But I always loved nothing more than going to either a market or independent stores and just having a look around, and because they often will do things in a really interesting way that a big retailer just can't. Big retailers often have to be a bit vanilla because they have to please so many people, because you have to be able to manufacture 10,000 of something in order to make the money. So
interesting.
I always found that sector very interesting. And I thought to myself, I wonder if it would be useful for them to know how big retailers think about these things. And the guy says to me, what's your business idea? And I said to him, well, and he said to me, I can't hear what you're saying. Can you speak up?
Speak up, dear.
I was so nervous. I couldn't almost get the words out. And so I think it is amazing when I think about where I was then and where I am now.
Yeah.
That I was scared of everything. When I first started, I was scared to tell him the idea. I was really scared of LinkedIn for a while, because that was where all of the people I knew. It was like Instagram was fine because I didn't really know that many people on Instagram, but
it's
LinkedIn.
That fear of judgment, because it's all your old, your employees or your bosses or your managers.
Yeah, totally. The first time I wrote a blog, I made about 4 people read it before I published it. And probably they were the only 4 people who ever read it. When I first started speaking on camera, I was terrified. I watched myself. I recorded myself every day for a week, watched it back.
Wow.
And then once I got confident, I was like, okay, now I can talk on camera. The first time, so I've been a Forbes.com contributor since 2020. It took me about 4 months to publish my first article, because you actually you put your article in the back end and it publishes onto the Forbes website. And so
without anybody checking it.
But they do have a process for checking through it. And they're very clear that obviously if there's any issues with it, then you're fully responsible. But still, it's very nerve-wracking. So there's been lots of times where I was just absolutely petrified. And I think that it's just something to do with, you just get used to it being uncomfortable.
Okay.
And I feel like that first couple of years in particular, after I left corporate and I started my own business, I learned all of these new skills.
Yeah.
I did so many firsts. And after you've been in a career for nearly 2 decades, yes, you take on new challenges, you have new team members, you deal with new products, but you're kind of doing the same process over and over.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then I'd gone from doing essentially a variation of the same thing for nearly 20 years to all of a sudden, having an Instagram account, talking on camera, working out about email lists and lead magnets and Facebook groups and everything else.
It's crazy when we think about how many things we have to do or had to do at that stage.
Yes.
What was the piece of advice then? What was the piece of advice that sticks with you, that got you through that early stage of your business? Because I want to take us up to the pandemic.
Yes.
So let's think 2018 to 2020. What was the advice that sticks with you?
I think there's a few different ones. There's a saying that something like everything you ever wanted is on the other side of fear.
Yeah.
And I think that it was at some point, I don't remember the exact moment, but at some point I just realized, if I want to do this, I'm going to be scared at times and I'm just going to have to work through it.
Accepting the feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I used to listen, and I still do from time to time, Jen Sincero, You Are a Badass, and You're a Badass at Making Money. They're these 2 books, and she's very funny. She's American. She swears a lot. But it's just very much like, if you want this to happen, you have to make it happen.
Yeah.
And it was really good. I used to listen to it on audiobook. I do love an audiobook. And I would go, if I was having a wobble, I would put my headphones in, I would go for a walk, I would listen to the audiobook, and it would just kind of give me that, okay, all right, let's give this a go. And there's a term in retail that gets bandied around a lot, which is JFDI, just effing do it.
Yeah.
And I think there were definitely times I would just be like, it is just a JFDI. You just got to do it. And I think there's also this exhilaration that you get as well when you just realize, actually, if I want to try this, I can try it. And at the beginning as well, I think once I realized that, I also was quite happy to just try lots of different things. I used to go networking to all kinds of different events and just reach out to people and say, hey, want to have coffee? I think once you realize that the worst thing that can happen is someone says no, it just is very freeing. And you just think, all right, let's just try it. So I think probably what helped was I developed this kind of curiosity.
Yeah, that's such a great word. Yeah.
And just this sort of almost this realization that it's easier to say anything you want to do, you can do. But effectively, when you're in corporate, you're constrained so much by what your role is, what your remit is, who you're allowed to talk to, what you're supposed to say, what you're supposed to do. And when you get out there and realize, well, actually, I can just do whatever I want.
And I'm in charge.
It's just such a great feeling that I think that kind of, suck it and see, for want of a better word, was just a feeling that kind of really got me through those early years, especially.
And so your core business, which we're going to speak about in a second, is the Resilient Retail Club?
Yes, the membership group.
So it's a membership group.
Yes.
So how many people do you approximately have in the membership group?
There's a couple of hundred people in the membership
group. Okay, so you're serving hundreds of people. So you're now placing your business where you've scaled.
Yeah.
Now we talk about feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes.
Or JFDI as you just called it. Now, I feel like there's a theme here because didn't you launch the Resilient Retail Club during the pandemic?
Yes.
When you would have had 2 children that you were homeschooling?
Yes.
Talk me through that crazy idea.
So I didn't start 2020 thinking I would start a membership.
Okay.
And I started 2020 thinking that I would launch a course, and I would launch it once in January, and I would launch it twice more throughout the year, once in May and once in September.
And who was this course for? The independent retailers?
Yes.
Okay.
So this was a course that was about growing your sales, and it was about it was sort of all of the fundamentals of how the creative ideas make money, which is kind of the most of what I do is about that, really.
Yeah, that's it's easy for me and tangible to understand.
Yes.
It's how creative ideas can make money and how you can be profitable. Had you run the course at this stage ever?
I had run, no, in short, no.
Okay.
I'd tried launching a course the previous year that actually I was thinking about things that went wrong. I think I launched it and I don't think anybody actually signed up. Okay. But I think I realized at that point it wasn't the right, I also realized I wasn't backing it. And it wasn't the right format. So I'd gone away and reworked it and really thought about this format. And so I was ready to relaunch. I think I had done one launch of it in 2019.
Okay.
Early 2020. And then, of course, in February, March, we all went into lockdown.
We did.
And I actually did a lot of work during that year. I had an advantage in 2020 in that as much as I had been through the 2008 economic crash, and I had worked for, at the time of Lehman Brothers collapsing in 2008, I was actually working for Austin Reed at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So Austin Reed, I was working for Country Casuals, which was owned by the Austin Reed Group.
But had a branch in Canary Wharf,
didn't
they? Yeah, that's where I remember them from. Yeah.
And Austin Reed's primary business was selling men's suits.
Okay.
And we had the financial crash, and we also had, it was really, really bad. I think perhaps we almost forget how bad it got, but, at one point, the stock market stopped trading and it was just complete meltdown. And at that time, I saw that there were 2 main ways that people were reacting. Some people were absolutely outraged at how things were going. And some people were like, okay, well, what can we do about this? And how can that word curiosity, they had a curiosity about what they could do. And so in the pandemic, I actually did quite a lot of work with people like trade shows, Small Business Britain. I started talking to them, Enterprise Nation, lots of small business people, because what I did was I had a talk that I did, which was called How to Come Back Stronger. And it was basically, what it said was, there are 2 ways you can approach this. You can get stuck in fear, or you can think about what it is that you need to do. And it wasn't really, I think, necessarily that I was saying anything completely wild and radical, but I think it was about being brave enough to say, actually, I think I've got something that could be useful. And nobody knew what to say, because none of us had seen anything like this before. And of course, it was very different to 2008, but in a way, it wasn't different. And that was the benefit of having been in the retail industry for so many years, was that I could say, well, look, we've had crises before. And of course, none of us knew how long it was going to go on for. But actually, in hindsight, the pandemic was great for a lot of e-commerce businesses.
Yeah.
But it was about just being able to be a bit reassuring and be able to say, talk to your customers, keep talking to them, over communicate with them, explain what you're doing. If you've decided it's too risky for you to go out and post your parcels, and therefore you're only going to do it once a week, then tell them that, and people will understand. So it was sort of that kind of message. Think about what you could do. Think about how you might be able to pivot. And so I started doing a lot of this kind of content. And I did that talk, I probably around, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 different times to different groups of people.
And where were you? So you were just running online sessions?
I was doing it over Zoom. Also, interestingly, I was working with some of the trade shows who never even knew. I actually made quite a lot of relationships with people because they just didn't know how Zoom worked. But because I've been, on doing an online business for a couple of years at this point, then I had that connection. So what I found was I really enjoyed showing up for people, and I really enjoyed that sense of, okay, well, I can actually be helpful. And it was actually a friend of mine, Laura Ludlow, who still runs an organization called Discover Her, which is a networking group for women. And I was part of it at that time. She said, I think you should she'd said this to me for a while, you should really run a membership. And I was like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of work. And then eventually I think the message just really hit home. I thought, right, well, if I have a membership, then I've got a space that people can come to, and I can be there and be encouraging to people, and it will work. Also, people are online a lot now. So I launched it in 2020. And really it went from there. So I put the course that I planned on launching, that became almost like the first piece of content.
Right.
And then from there we put into it, I then almost like backfilled additional content as we went through, and over time built up a big library. And the membership's built around 3 pillars, which is content, around the community, which is in a Facebook group, which is still a really great supportive place for people to be. And then we also do live events as well. So we have guest experts who come in. We have community co-working time. I do Ask Me Anything sessions. So that was really the key part of the membership. And that's really been there since the get-go.
So that's really interesting, because actually I think there's kind of a lot of talk around memberships at the moment. You hear a lot about, there's not any engagement in my group, or I'm trying to move off Facebook, and people are talking about other platforms.
Yeah.
How have you kept it going since 2020? We're now in 2025.
Yeah. And
if anything, it's bigger than ever. What is it? What's the secret to that level of engagement in a membership?
I think it's, it's been up and down. I won't say it's like, I think that it is a challenge, and I think it has changed, and I think it is different now in 2025 than it was. I think the key thing is that letting people talk to each other, letting people create some bonds as a community themselves.
So it's that peer-to-peer element.
Yeah, and right. I think one of the pieces of advice that I got quite early on in terms of engagement was, don't always try and be the first person to answer the question.
Yeah, because I've had that advice too, yeah.
Because if somebody asks a question and it seems like, the only person who can answer this is Catherine, then it doesn't encourage other people to answer questions.
Great tip.
Yeah, because sometimes I go in there and someone will have asked a question, and sometimes it's about a subject that the best people to answer it is other business owners. So I think that that's something that I definitely found early on was really beneficial, to just not try and squash additional conversation, and also don't be afraid to have icebreakers that are nothing to do with business. So people love to talk about their pets. They love to share their own. It's not, you don't promote your own business, but from time to time we will allow people to share, what are you offering for, especially at Christmas, for example, what are you selling that would be great gifts, and encouraging people to shop from each other, that kind of thing.
So we've got the core part of the business. the pandemic for you, it was you were able to leverage the kind of almost like the advantage that you had.
Yes.
You already knew the online space.
Yeah.
You suddenly saw that there were people who needed to be led.
Yes.
And you were able to lead them.
Yes.
How do you then take it from the business it was then
Yeah.
to where you are with it now? Because you've had, from what I know, a fair bit of growth over the last couple of years.
Yes.
What was it? What's changed?
Well, I put in place, I think partly a big piece of it really was looking at the offer all the way through. So memberships are fabulous. They are a great way of having a low cost offer for people who aren't in a position or not at the right stage in their business to invest hugely into business advice, but they get great access to me so they can ask me questions and you can offer really great resources. And so for me, the membership's important because it means that I can offer my advice, information, help lots of people in a wider way. What I found was that works great for lots of people, but especially as businesses grow, they move from needing education to really needing direct advice. And I'd always worked as a one-to-one business mentor / consultant. Really, from the start, I'd done work with people one-on-one, but it had always been a fairly sporadic, not sporadic, but maybe it varied. At certain points, I would have lots of people, or sometimes I would scale it right back. And what I didn't have was effectively a process or a program that people started at one end and then went through to the end that was a different offer to the membership, but it was much more for people who they knew that if they signed up to the membership, they just wouldn't be able to have the accountability that they needed to get things done in their business.
Right.
And they just had a different need. So I joined the Rebels program with Andrew and Pete, and I've been a Rebel now for nearly 2 years, over 2 years actually, just over 2 years. So I joined that in 2023, and one of their suggestions was about this additional offer for the businesses that were a different stage, that just needed that more direct input. And so I created the Retail by Design program, which is a 6-month program where I work with cohorts of people who come in. So cohorts anywhere between 6 and 10 business owners who are established business owners who want specifically to work on their business from that strategic level. So usually what they want is more structure, more support, a really in-depth look at their business fundamentals. They want to really understand how to move from the roller coaster of running a business to feeling in the driver's seat. And so that was a big shift for me as well, because then I was really focusing on that program at specific times of the year. So I launched that 3 times of the year. And it's really hugely rewarding because it combines the one-to-one work that I was doing, but it effectively almost formalizes it into a process. And then you also have a group element, which again comes back to what I love, is that group element. And I was able to then create that sort of next level up of the group engagement, which has been at the heart of what I've done for many, many years now. And so that made a big difference to the business as well.
So who have you had to become in order to be able to deliver 2 key parts of your business? Mm-hmm. So you've got the membership, which you've said, at peak can have hundreds of members in it.
Yeah.
And then you've got this 6-month high ticket, high level mastermind group program.
Yeah.
What was that shift? Who did you have to become?
I don't know that I had to. I think I was already delivering. As I said, I was already working with people one-to-one, so it wasn't anything.
Okay, so it was scaling that.
Yes, I think probably more of it was about having the right support. So in the membership group, for example, we have a fabulous community manager, Rachel. So that really helps with the membership because she's there to. For me, the most important thing is the members have a great experience. And so she's there to help with, response times and as well as the engagement and everything else. So I think for me, it's about bringing in that support. And then with Retail by Design, that is much more me. I mean, obviously I have admin support as well. I do have a great mindset coach, Annabelle, who comes in and delivers sessions with the participants as well, which has been a really great complement to the work I do, because everything I do is super practical. So everything I do is about cash flow, stock management, profit margins, structure, strategy. So we're very much focused on the kind of logical side of running a business. And then Annabelle bringing, what was a real revelation was, if you've got that higher level program, you can have additional areas of support that maybe aren't your zone of genius.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I hold very strongly is this belief, as I touched on at the beginning, that you, as an online business owner, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out there. So I'm a big believer in, you deliver what you've got experience in and what will make a difference for your clients. And it was a real revelation to think, right, well, I could actually bring someone in who, of course, we always touch on mindset and self-belief as a business owner, but I'm not going to pretend that's my area of expertise, but I can bring in Annabelle, who's incredibly highly qualified, very experienced coach with, more qualifications than you can shake a stick at, and know that I'm then delivering that in a way that really reflects that integrity, but adds a whole new dimension to this program. So that, for me, it was about how to build that process, build that structure around the programs.
So are you saying that in order for you to scale, you almost had to let go a little bit, because you then were starting to bring in other people, and obviously that's an overhead?
Yes. And actually, I've got a third offer as well. So I have the Stock Doctor offer, which is something that I developed last year. And we're still, we've been refining it over the last year and tweaking it, and it's a phenomenal program. But that was really a big learning curve as well, because that is a done for you service. And effectively what Stock Doctor does is, I work with very carefully chosen people who actually have a very similar background to me, similar experience, and they go into a lot of the people who take part are bricks and mortar retailers, because they're extremely time poor. So what they do is they go into their back end, they take their numbers, they prepare what in the corporate retail world would have been called a trading report, and then present back to them once a month and say, right, based on what we can see, you need to focus on this product area, that product area, and this is what we would suggest that you do in order to basically make the most out of your stock, which for most retailers is their biggest investment. And one of the biggest struggles that product business owners have is that so much business advice is tailored towards service businesses, and service businesses, and I know because I run one, have completely different cost structures to product businesses. So having someone who can tell you how to manage the thing that you spend most of your money on more effectively is a game changer. But for me, that was really a big shift in terms of, I don't deliver the Stock Doctor service. I have people who deliver it on my behalf that I have very carefully selected, and that follow it's general retail principles, but specifically the sort of terminology I use and a lot of my templates that I use. It's also written a book about stock management as well, and making money from your business. So it's taking that kind of methodology effectively and then applying it to somebody's business. But yes, that letting go, it's definitely something that, as you scale, for sure, you have to learn how to do that.
And when we think about where you were in a business where you're working in corporate, and actually you were saying, like, the biggest gap was that there wasn't that kind of leadership. There wasn't that, how are we going to make this work? This is tough, but we're going to buckle down, and these are the tools we need to get through it.
Yes.
That's what was missing.
Yes.
Now you are growing and scaling your business.
Yes.
You've got team members.
Yes.
What has this allowed you to do in your life? Like, what does life get to look like for you now?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think for me, the business has always been about, an intellectual challenge, no doubt about it. Like, as I said, I love business as a subject. I find it endlessly fascinating. So there's that element. It's been about a financial, being able to support the family and myself financially, contribute towards that. And it's also been about definitely about flexibility. So that's kind of the core pillars of what makes the business successful to me.
So it's allowed you, so having your business at this size has allowed you to do what in your life? What does it mean for you now?
Well, I think the key thing is that it's flexibility for sure. So it's about, the business has always been about giving me an intellectual challenge, because at one point I remember my husband saying to me, if you quit your job, because when I was originally thinking of leaving and we didn't really have a plan, he said, you're the kind of person, if you quit your job on Friday, you'd be bored by Monday. And he's not wrong. I definitely somebody who needs to be busy, needs to be working on things. So the business is important for me from that perspective. Having the purpose as well. And I'd say my purpose is that I believe that the retail industry can be better, can be kinder.
Interesting.
And that independent retailers and e-commerce brands, most of the people I work with are doing it because they want to make life better for themselves and better for the planet and for the people who make their products. So that's very rewarding to feel like I'm playing part in that success. But in terms of what it allows me to do, then definitely contribute financially to my family, while not having a boss. That is something that I never gets old.
It doesn't, does it?
It just doesn't get old. Just not having a boss. And I had some really shocking bosses, or I should say I had a lot of bosses who I think were under a lot of pressure. So therefore...
That's a very kind thing for you to say. Yeah.
So I had a lot of difficult experiences with bosses. And so not having a boss, that's forever will be what the business has given me. And flexibility. I have 2 children, as you said. Now, I definitely waited till they were older to start my business.
Okay.
I don't think that's a coincidence. They were 8 and 11 when I started. They're 14 and 17 now. And I don't think, whenever I work with people who have tiny children in a business, I'm always absolutely full of admiration, because when my children were little, I could just about manage to hand them off to someone else and go to work. I really needed that separation. Mm-hmm. But obviously, as they get older, they need you in a different way. And having that flexibility has been so important. Last year, for example, my son broke his leg in a bike accident. And it meant a huge amount that I could drive him to school every day for 3 months because that's what he needed, that I was able to be there. And I honestly don't know how we would have managed that if I wasn't working for myself, because I did 10 years as a full-time working mother in terms of dropping the kids at the pre-breakfast breakfast club, commuting into town, working a full day. This was pre-pandemic. There was no working from home.
Yeah.
There was precious little flexible working in my entire career, because the retail industry really demands a lot from the people who work in it. And when everything worked, it worked. But, my husband and I were always running somewhere, picking someone up. It was, you needed a plan B and a plan C and a plan D in case something went wrong. Somebody was ill or anything like that. It felt very precarious. And so I think for me, what having this business and it being successful, being able to pay myself from the business, what is meant has been that I've not had to go back to the office. I don't have to have a boss, and I get to have that flexibility where, so often I say, when I used to work full time, and then I think, no, I still work.
I now work full time twice. Yes.
But I get the flexibility, you know, if I want to have an afternoon off because it's the school holidays, then great. If I need to take time because somebody's not well, or even just the fact if someone's not well, they can be at home and I'm there. But, obviously as they get older, your needs or their needs change. But I think for me, that's what the business has meant. I've been able to keep doing that.
So I think you said something really key there, which is building a business that allows me to do those things that is successful. So you've shared with me lots of moments that have allowed you to see that success. When have you had to get brave when things have felt a little bit scary during the, because it almost feels like it's a no-brainer. There's no way on earth you would ever go back to that life that you had before, particularly not with what you've been able to build. But growth is rarely linear. Have there been any moments that have been really scary where you have had to be really brave?
I think there have been many moments where I've had to be really brave. I think that you have to be relentless as a business owner in a way. And I think that one of the things that annoys me actually is that when people talk about small business ownership as this kind of like magic wand, because I actually think a lot of people are not cut out in terms of their personality to be small business owners. And I don't mean that in a negative way. But I think what I'm trying to say is there's actually a lot of benefits to being paid a regular salary and having paid sick time and paid holidays. And it annoys me when people who are big into entrepreneurship almost look down on that and say, oh, well, I've escaped the 9 to 5. And I think the reality is for a lot of small business owners is not that straightforward. And I don't think we should sell the myth that small business ownership is for everybody, because I think temperamentally you have to be very thick-skinned. You have to be really quite relentless at times. And there have definitely been times where I've had a launch or I've done something and it hasn't worked, or I haven't hit the goal that I wanted to hit. And you do have to kind of brush yourself off, dust yourself down and go, right, what else can I do? Being brave sometimes is sending a DM to someone you really want to work with that feels like you'd rather kind of like peel your skin off than actually say to somebody, hey, I'd love to work with you. I think it's sort of a slightly British thing. Like we don't like to ask for things. We don't like to put ourselves out there. So I think as a business owner, you do have to push yourself out of your comfort zone time and time again. When I launched Retail by Design, or Mastermind as it was called when I first launched it, I had to do sales calls. And I'd done sales calls before, but they were very much more like, usually it was somebody who was pretty much 100% sure they wanted to work with me, but we were almost having a call about the practical stuff, which was great because it meant that I had a very high conversion rate, but it also, for my sales calls, but it also meant that I didn't actually have that much practice in getting on a call with somebody where there was more persuasion involved.
Right, okay.
So that was something that I had to overcome. That was a fear. That used to be, when I had a call booked into my calendar, I would be like, oh no, okay, it's sales call, I have to like psych myself up for it. But, I did that because I recognized that I wanted to introduce another revenue stream into the business. So because I wanted to not be overly reliant on the membership, I wanted to look at different ways of growing. And so I think that there's lots of times that you do have to push yourself. You have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. And I am a little bit like, I can be a little bit like a dog with a bone. Like because I want the business to succeed, because I want to be able to keep doing this and have this fabulous ability to have more flexibility and call the shots, really is what it boils down to, be in charge of my own destiny, then I am willing to try different things. I'm certainly not too proud to ask for help. I ask for help a lot, and I get help from my team. I get help from working with Andrew and Pete. And I think that you have to be like that as a business owner. You just have to be willing to work through it. And actually, Andrew and Pete, they interviewed Seth Godin a few months ago. And one thing that he said that actually really stuck with me was, he said, if you're training for a marathon, which incidentally I am also training for a marathon, so maybe that's why it really hit home. He said, you wouldn't expect your running coach to teach you how to train for a marathon without getting tired. You just have to work out where to put the tired. And he said, it's like that.
Amazing.
If you're a business owner, you don't expect to build your business without being scared. You just have to work out where to put the fear. And I just thought it was such a brilliant analogy. It's like being scared is almost part of being a business owner, but it's not anything that will ever go away. So, why not choose fun things to be scared of?
I mean, such a brilliant way to put it. What weren't you prepared for? What weren't you prepared for?
As a business owner?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Because you're making it sound pretty appealing. It's very clear that you do need to be resilient and tenacious.
Yes.
But what weren't you prepared for?
What wasn't I prepared for was that it can feel really tough. It can, that your mindset has an infuriatingly big impact on your business. And there are times that I really wish it didn't. But the truth is that there's that saying, if you believe you can or believe you can't, then you're right. And I think that that's the thing that I've seen time and time again, is that you achieve what you believe in. And you can say, oh, well, that's easy, then I'll just believe I'm going to succeed. But that is hard when you've done something and it doesn't work out, because then you get all the mind gremlins that go, oh, well, actually, maybe you're not cut out for this, or maybe this was a mistake, or maybe this is just too much, or maybe that person over there is doing it so much better than you. And I think that is something that you really have to manage. I think about it like, it's a bit like mental hygiene. So, you don't just brush your teeth once and then that's it, you've got clean teeth forever. It's like with your mindset, you have to work on it all the time. You have to work on it every day.
That's why they call it mental fitness, because it's something you do repeatedly.
Yeah. And I think it's annoying, because wouldn't it be great if it was just about how hard we worked?
Yeah. Wouldn't it just be great if just the hardest working people got success? But that isn't always the equation.
No, the hardest or the smartest or the best at what they did. Who knows? But yeah, I think that is something that I wasn't really prepared for. But, over time, it's probably one of the things I've worked on the most as well.
That's, I think, a really valuable share, because no matter what industry you're in, I think our mindset is so key.
Yes.
Thinking about kind of mindset and a lot of the people that you work with.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's so much talk about what's happening with the high street. There are so many e-commerce businesses online. Mm-hmm. How much of a challenge is that for the businesses that you support? Their mindset and their belief that it is possible for them to be profitable.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that it's interesting about the high street, because there's an organisation called High Street Positives run by Laura Harris, and she's done quite a lot of research into the impact on high streets of negative press. So if you publish a load of stories about how the high street is dying, you actually have an impact on the high street. So people don't go as much because they're like, oh, well, high streets are fading, aren't they? And I actually think that that's such a great example of how what we talk about, can have an impact on people's shopping habits, and how it's important when we talk about the industry to recognize that actually there's lots of people who have really great businesses, really great independent retailers. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there aren't massive challenges. And yes, every time the business rates go back up and employee wage, national insurance contributions go up, it's not another challenge for people to overcome. But I think that there is a great appetite from people to shop local, to shop with great businesses who have really beautifully curated stores. I think if anything, people feel good about spending money with local and independent retailers. So I think that's really positive. And then with the online space, I mean, for sure, there are more and more people starting online retail businesses as well. But I think that, again, there are lots of people who have grown significant businesses in a way that they just wouldn't have been able to even 10 years ago. You think about Shopify and how easy that makes it. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd have been spending over £10,000 to get a transactional website. Now you can have one for a small fee each month. So I think that just like anything, there's I don't know if it's any harder than it's been before, but I think there's a lot of great opportunities, because I think the customer is really responding and wants more and more to shop small and shop independent.
And a reminder, it's of how you look at something. It's different sides of the same coin, and like how much more positively that was just framed. On that, I want to ask you a question. So you recently did your Retail Online Summit, which was just everywhere, and I had the pleasure of getting to join a couple of your sessions.
Yes.
That, when I think of the number of people that would have signed up to your membership, the people you get on your group program, what is the secret to getting a yes?
From people signing up, or from people?
From all of those people, because look at how many examples you've got there of people who will have said yes to you, whether that's signing up to work with you or whether that is joining you as a speaker. What is it about Catherine that causes people to say yes?
Well, first off, I absolutely love Retail Raw. And again, to give Andrew and Pete credit, they definitely helped me shape that and helped, and believe it's Andrew actually came up with the idea in the first place. And really what the idea with Retail Raw was a big dose of inspiration and motivation, showing them what was possible. So the idea with the speakers is that it's about half and half between people who've got these inspiring businesses and people who've got great practical advice for retailers and e-commerce brands. And the motivational speakers, I ask myself this question all day long, all year long, is who's the most inspiring people for the people that I want to reach. And for me, it's the people who started where they started and now have grown the business, and now it's, got a chain of stores, or it's multi-million pound turnover. So part of it was about leveraging my connections that I already had in the industry. So I've been contributing to Forbes since 2020. So I've made some great connections there. I've got great connections within other people who serve independent retailers and brands. And I'd had just lots of connection points with lots of different people, from trade shows to organizations to industry publications. And I didn't really know how to kind of pull that all together. But the idea was, with this kind of flagship event, it was something really, really positive that could hit a large number of people. So, for example, we had 2,500 people sign up for it this year. And so what was the secret in the yes? I think for the speakers, a lot of the time it was about a really personalized pitch. So we created a pitch document that basically said, this is what's in it for you. We tried to make it as easy as possible for them, and also sold the dream of these people. That there's a lot going on right now, but we believe in a better retail industry. We believe in people, the role that they can play in that industry, and we want to inspire them, and will you be part of it? And I think when you've got a mission like that, it makes it easier for people to say, okay, yes, that's great. And it's a free event, so it's a couple of days, really great content, really interesting people all pulled together. And again, I think it's about making the yes as easy as possible for the people that you want, and really working out, as I said, why that person, and giving them a compelling reason, saying, this is your story. This story is going to make a lot of difference to a lot of people. And therefore, I think that really, really helped pull the whole thing together. And then I felt like it was like building a cake, you do a bit where you pull in some great people who are going to help promote it, and then you tell the speakers that, and then you get great speakers, and then you go tell more people, oh, look, we've got these speakers. So it's kind of like a real back and forth. And then in terms of what gets people to say yes to the programs, I think ultimately it's always about what can it do for them, demonstrating to people that this works, that this makes a difference, that I've worked with people who had really significant turnovers but weren't making profit, and we've been able to improve that for them. We've helped people who were feeling like there was a missing ingredient in their business or something they just didn't get, helped them understand that, and really helped people feel much more confident in their business. And that's, a lot of what I do is about giving people the tools to feel empowered in their business, and to understand, again, like, how do you make money and how do you manage your stock, which is your thing you spend the most on. So a lot of case studies, a lot of testimonials. I've worked, over the last 7 years now, I've worked with probably well over 200 businesses one-to-one. And so I've seen behind the scenes of a lot of different retail businesses, which is great. And then, several hundred people in the membership. So we've got lots of testimonials and quotes from people, case studies. And I think there's always more I can do. It's always something I want to do more of, is highlight even more of these. But I think that's a really big part of it as well. I think more than anything, people want proof, don't they?
Yeah.
Which just makes sense. I get it. We all want proof.
Well, I mean, you shared such an amazing story of your business. And, you know, what we want is to showcase people that are bold with the steps that you've taken. And, you know, thank you for the number of bold steps and also for breaking it down for us. And it's like, I know I say this, but it's so interesting to see the themes that come through.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to leave our audience with. So let's wrap up with a little bit of a rapid fire round. So, Catherine, let me ask you a few questions.
Yes.
If we were to say, what is the next bold move you're going to make? What would you say?
Ooh. Well, I'd say I want Retail Raw even bigger.
Okay.
We had probably the big scary thing for me this year was having sponsors, because that was something that I'd never done before. And with sponsors, it's a different way of working, because you're really helping deliver something that's not just great for you, but great for them too.
Absolutely.
And I want it to get even bigger. And I have a vision for Retail Raw and making it just even more valuable for the people who come, and a great event for people to sponsor, and just like a real highlight in the calendar for the independent retail industry. So I think that for me is a big part of it. And yeah, just continuing to do as really, I love to write about the retail industry. I love to learn about it. I'm constantly fascinated by where it's going. My business was originally called Future Retail. That was actually its original name, because I was so fascinated by changes to the industry and where it's going. And I love to lean into that.
I love how the sense of curiosity has taken you through.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about three things before we wrap up, which is, what are you currently watching?
Yeah. So I'm currently watching Apple Cider Vinegar on Netflix.
Yeah.
Which I'm a bit behind the curve on. I know most people have probably already seen it, but
I haven't.
What I love about this is a topic that really fascinates me. So it's about somebody who was an influencer who incorrectly claimed to have cured their brain cancer through healthy eating. And what I find fascinating about that, and I've read quite a lot and I've watched quite a lot on this subject, is as an online business operator, I'm constantly fascinated by this idea of influence, for good and for bad, and for how people, and because I think as business owners, we have to ask ourselves that question: are we representing ourselves correctly? And there's that nuance about influence, persuasion, and making sure that you're doing it with integrity for you. And so whenever you see someone who's clearly gone veering off in the realm of non-integrity, I'm always slightly fascinated by it.
Okay, one to add to the list. Reading. What are you reading right now?
Well, I'm simultaneously reading and listening. So this is something that might surprise you, but one of the things I decided at the beginning of this year was that I didn't want any gritty realism.
Yeah.
So I was like, there's enough gritty realism. So I only want things that are entirely not based in reality. And one of the things I've realized over the years is that I absolutely love anything in the kind of classical fantasy genre, like, you know, Tolkien, that kind of thing. And so at the beginning of the year, I'd looked up what are the best audiobooks, because I love audiobooks. And more than anything, I love audiobooks where they're really well performed.
Okay.
Because it's almost like listening to a radio play or something like that. And so it said that The Wheel of Time, which is a fantasy series written in the 90s, it was performed by Rosamund Pike, who incidentally, the Amazon Prime Video decided to create, they actually did a couple of series of it. They actually made it into a TV show. I haven't seen the TV show. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I am simultaneously listening to and reading the Wheel of Time series, which is 14 books long, and I'm nearly at the end of book 8.
Well, the joy that's on your face, clearly that's another one for me to add to the list.
And I just think it's, you know, so great for the character building. For me, it's the ultimate way to switch off my brain, because you're just so invested in although there's so many characters, most of the time I've got no idea what's going on, but I still love it.
Yeah, that bit feels familiar. Catherine, thank you so much. It's been so inspiring listening to you. And I think we'll have to get you back for part 2 another time.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Don't Work Harder. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share. This show has been brought to you by Atomic, the home of epic business growth. Head to our website at atomic.site to hear more about our business programs and epic events.